even in this World War II context, right, we are starting to see like a uprising in some of sort of like a revisionist of World War One and World War Two, primarily World War Two. So, for example, Tucker Carlson, he hosted this historian Darryl Cooper, and part of what the guy said was that he said Churchill was like the chief villain of World War Two. Like Winston Churchill was the chief villain of World War Two, and then he also went on to say things like implying basically that the Holocaust was more like an accident in the sense that he was pretty much saying like the Germans the Germans wanted a form of ceasefire, but then they had too many prisoners of war. They had too many prisoners of war, right? And so they had to decide either they let them starve to death or they will try to like fast track their death process to make it merciful.
Serious.
So that was part of what was implied, right? That was part of what was implied.
I'm American. I'm not English, so I don't have any weird motive in asking this, but how would you assess Winston Churchill?
I got in trouble with my podcast partner, Jocko Willink, one time because he's a New England Dutchman whose his family, it's near and dear to, they're Dutch, but very near and dear to their heart that Winston Churchill is a hero, right?
Well, everyone
thinks that. He really thinks that. And I told him that I think, and maybe I'm being a little hyperbolic, maybe, but I told him, maybe trying to provoke him a little bit, that I thought Churchill was the chief villain of the Second World War. Now, he didn't kill the most people. He didn't commit the most atrocities, but I believe, and I think when you really get into it and tell the story right and don't leave anything out, you see that he was primarily responsible for that war becoming what it did, becoming something other than an invasion of Poland. Or just, I mean, at every step of the way, like people are very often, I find, surprised to learn. There's a two-step process.
Well,
right?
why don't you just make the case for that? Okay, so you've made your statement. A lot of people are thinking, well, wait a second. You just said Churchill, my childhood hero, the guy with the cigar.
Yeah. Well, and the next thought that comes into their head is that, oh, you're saying Churchill was the chief villain, therefore his enemies, Adolf Hitler and so forth, were
Stalin,
the protagonists, right?
Yeah.
That they're the good guys if you think he's a villain. That's not the case. That's not what I'm saying. Germany, look, they put themselves into a position, and Adolf Hitler's chiefly responsible for this, but his whole regime is responsible for it, that when they went into the East in 1941, they launched a war where they were completely unprepared to deal with the millions and millions of prisoners of war, of local political prisoners and so forth that they were going to have to handle. They went in with no plan for that. And they just threw these people into camps, and millions of people ended up dead there. You have like letters as early as July, August 1941 from commandants of these makeshift camps that they're setting up for these millions of people who are surrendering or people they're rounding up. And so it's 2 months after, a month or two after Barbarossa was launched. And they're writing back to the high command in Berlin saying, we can't feed these people. We don't have the food to feed these people. And one of them actually says, rather than wait for them all to slowly starve this winter, wouldn't it be more humane to just finish them off quickly now?
So, but when you look at people like trying to revise this history of World War II, do you feel like the account of World War II itself is credible? Or do you feel like this revisionist, maybe there may be a bit of sense in what they are saying?
Let him go. Okay. So, oftentimes when I say a lot of revisions to any historical thing, I like to try to get the intention of who is trying to revise it. Like, what are you trying to aim at here? Like, what is the end goal? Are you trying to just tell us, oh, this is what really happened? Or you're trying to say, what you guys have been thinking all along is all wrong. This is the right thing. So I like to look at it through that. And then I also try to look at the overwhelming consensus on it. When you look at writing history, it is difficult to write an account of any historical account like 100%. I'm going to give an example here before I even answer that question. Is look at what happened October 2020, for instance, in Nigeria at Lekki Tollgate. We lived through the event, like we all lived through the event, and it's very difficult to arrive at a consensus at what happened at it. We've had so many revisions on it.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't think it's difficult, dude.
It's not difficult.
There are always people
But
that will
I get your point.
that
I will give
That
this
try to
example.
change the
There was
accounts.
in life. There was an Instagram which I joined.
Yeah.
I
I saw
joined
it.
the
I saw it
Instagram,
as well.
right?
Yeah.
It's not the people were saying it. I joined the Instagram
What
live,
did
right?
you?
Yeah.
And you have people that will tell you to any extent how it was completely doctored. So I like to now look at account of
I've
history
had
in
arguments with people like that. Like,
versus. So when I
it's
see
crazy.
revisionists talk like that, I don't take them seriously. To be very honest, I mean, look at what you said about the genocide was seriously. I mean, look.
So let me explain. His position was that
Yeah.
Hitler wanted to make some concessions, right, and
Yeah.
reach a ceasefire agreement, but that maybe because of the invasion of Poland, Churchill had already drawn the line that you've crossed my red line, especially with the invasion of Belgium and all, some of the other things that happened later on. He said, like, you've crossed my red line. So he was not willing to reach that ceasefire agreement. You understand? Like, he was like, even, no matter what the Germans proposed, it's like he had already made up his mind that he wants to deal with them.
And throughout that summer, Adolf Hitler is firing off radio broadcasts, giving speeches, literally sending planes over to drop leaflets over London and other British cities, trying to get the message to these people that Germany does not want to fight you. Like, we don't want to fight you. Offering peace proposals that, it said, you keep all your overseas colonies. We don't want any of that. We want Britain to be strong. The world needs Britain to be strong, especially as we face this communist threat and so forth. Like, this is what's going on. And so Churchill, I mean, you have a guy, Churchill wanted a war. He wanted to fight Germany. And the reason that I don't begrudge him that, people can national leaders, you can fight whoever you want. If you feel like your the long-term interests of the British Empire are threatened by the rise of a powerful continental power like Germany, and you need to check that those are great power games, and you play them the way you feel like you need to play them. That's fine. The reason I resent Churchill so much for it is that he kept this war going when he had no way to go back and fight this war. All he had were bombers. He was literally, by 1940, sending bomber fleets to go firebomb the Black Forest, just to burn down sections of the Black Forest. Just rank terrorism, going through and starting to, what eventually became just the carpet bombing, the saturation bombing of civilian neighborhoods, to kill, is the purpose of which was to kill as many civilians as possible. And all the men were out in the field. All the fighting age men were out in the field. And so this is old people, it's women and children, and they knew that. And they were wiping these places out. It was as gigantic scaled terrorist attacks, the greatest, scale of terrorist attacks you've ever seen in world history.
Why would he do that?
Because it was the only means that they had to continue fighting at the time. They didn't have the ability to reinvade Europe. And so he needed to keep this war going until he accomplished what he hoped to accomplish.
What was the motive?
Well, Churchill's got a long and complicated history. I mean, he's somebody who
That was the wryest smile I think I've ever seen.
Yeah. Well, look, I think on one level, there was a sense that Churchill was sort of humiliated by his performance in the First World War as the head of the Admiralty, and he was out in the cold for a long time.
I mean, Gallipoli.
Yeah, and which was his operation.
Yeah,
I mean, and so he was rightly held responsible for that and seen as responsible for one of the great disasters that the British suffered during that war. And so I think part of it was probably kind of personal. He wanted redemption. He wanted to go out there and like prove that he's the warlord that they can go out there and fight this big war. Probably. I think part of it, I read about Churchill and he strikes me as a psychopath.
So that's like his position was, like, Churchill was preventing ceasefire agreements from being reached. So that's why he ended up saying that, because of that, he ended up being
join the war. That's
chief.
like the question they will ask.
Yeah, so I think when they invaded Poland, the British and the French.
No, I'm just trying to like drive a point there. I mean,
Yeah.
the war started.
Yeah, it didn't even start under Churchill's regime. Yeah, it didn't start under Churchill's.
So how do you now pin it on?
So yeah, but and Tucker Carlson called him like one of the best and reliable.
Of course, Tucker Carlson will call it the most reliable. Of course, it's Tucker Carlson.
One of the trusted. Yeah, I think that was the French. Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but that's
So yeah, but what do you feel about revisionist of World War II?
that's a very, very wrong perspective to take. I'm sorry, because you even just have to go to the period leading up to the war and how the Jews in Germany were basically starting to be blamed for the lost
Yeah,
World
yeah, yeah.
War by the Nazis. So they were rounded up, their possessions taken from them, and they were taken to camps and mines. So from the start, you already projected death to these people at some point.
Yeah, yeah.
So even in Poland, like places like the Warsaw Ghetto, if you look at how the Warsaw, there's I think a documentary that I watched. If you look at how the Warsaw Ghetto was in 1939 and how it was by 1943, there it is an astounding show of, I don't know the term I'll use, probably a mixture of starvation, war, hunger, and destitution can do to a people. People were literally dying on the streets. So these guys always had that in them. You have to know the people that you are dealing with here.
Yeah.
The people you are dealing with were driven by an ideological mindset. They saw some set of people as subhuman. So there's no form of negotiation you were going to do with them at that point that was going to change it. As long as they had any form of power, they were always going to do what they were going to do. I mean, Hitler and his cohorts at some point, they met together for what they called the final solution. And then they were putting these guys in gas chambers. And they saw it as a faster way of eliminating those people, because even the men of the SS that were in charge of those camps were tired of shooting those people. They got traumatized, so it's got easier if they put them in gas chambers, turn on the machine, the gas chamber, and after 5 minutes everybody is dead. So basically you can't stop that kind of ideology. Just like the fascists in Italy or
You can't
Japan,
reach a ceasefire
Imperial
with them.
Japan, where those guys were not going to surrender.
Yeah, kamikaze.
I mean, how do you even revise that? Like,
Yeah.
that's
So but it's a growing trend, and many people are trying to. I think the reason why people are revising or trying to like approach that viewpoint of revisionism is that they feel that there have been so many matters that the government, particularly like the US government and the world powers as a whole, have been dishonest about. Right? They feel like there's so many things that have been hidden. Maybe like with Kennedy, for example, the CIA coming out to say that it was a lone shooter and all of that. But people don't really buy that. Most people don't buy that just one random dude was able to target the president. So they feel like maybe there's a conspiracy of all these things.
That's true. I actually know that when you see an element of distrust in something, you will tend to distrust everything that they've said.
Yeah.
But I think that's a mistake, to be very honest. I mean, when we look at World War II and the aftermath of it, and the involvement of the Jews and the kind of calamity they suffered, come on, like it was so clear that Hitler was not going to stop, anyways, if it was not stopped,
Yeah.
and if they were successful at getting the nuclear bomb faster than the United States,
Wow,
obviously they would have used
All of
it.
us will be saying, hey,
But they used all the available options to them.
As in,
Like
they
they
were
used all
already
the available.
developing like
Yeah.
the V2
Yeah.
bombs, and scientists like Albert Einstein and who was of German origin.
Yeah.
They were literally, people were looking at them in particular. Are you sure you're not working for this guy? Things
Einstein
like
went
that.
to the
Niels
US
Bohr.
government.
Yeah. So they were. It was basically an arms race of who gets the most destructive weapon
at that point.
fastest.
Yeah.
So, and for the Japanese, basically, you don't even with the ideology they had, you just had to look at the human cost of lives at that point. The invasion of mainland Japan, what the US suffered in battles like Okinawa and Iwo Jima.
They're
It
raising
was
civilians
really
as
devastating.
yeah.
So invading the country, because those were islands before you get to Japan.
Yeah.
So invading mainland Japan, it was going to cost
cost
between
of,
250,000 to 1 million US troops their lives.
Yeah.
So what does that exact on your country? So I mean, it's not a good solution, but it was the only alternative
Yeah.
at that point.
At that point.
At
So
that point
yeah,
in time.
yeah.